So in state administration, we have 5 blocks with 14 units in state administration. In first block, we will discuss about the constitutional framework, which consists of 3 units. Unit 1, Administrative History of Telangana. Unit 2, Governor. And in Unit 3, we'll be looking about Chief Minister. Today, let's look into Unit 1, which is Administrative History of Telangana. In this class, we will discuss how Telangana was ruled during different periods by different rulers and their contributions to administration, law, military, and society. In the third semester, you must have already studied about administrative system of India during Mauryan period, Guptan period, Mughals, and the British. It must have provided the general description of the administrative system in the pre-independence period, spanning ancient, medieval, and modern periods. Such similar kinds of systems, they have also prevailed in Telangana region in the past. Several kings who ruled the region of Telangana in the past, they have left their own impressions and administrative system, law and order, judicial system, arts and architecture, even war strategies for expansion of kingdoms and developmental activities, etc. These rulers had their own impressions. And you're also aware that the Telugu speaking parts of Madras Presidency was formed into Andhra state on 1st October 1953 due to the struggle waged by Potti Sriramulu. Later on, the Telangana region was merged with Andhra state to form into Andhra Pradesh state on November 1st. On November 1st, 1956, based on the recommendations of State Reorganization Commission and on reaching certain agreements. But the people of Telangana, they soon realized that the promises made and the agreements reached, they were broken under the leadership of Andhra. And they were agitating for separate statehood to Telangana. Ultimately, the prolonged struggle for 6 decades by the people, it resulted in separate statehood to Telangana bifurcating into Andhra Pradesh and formed a separate state on 2nd June 2014 as a 29th state of India with Hyderabad as its capital. Prior to merger of Telangana region of Hyderabad, princely state with the Andhra to form into Andhra Pradesh, the Telangana region was under several dynasties like Satavahana, Chalukyas, Kakatiyas, Bahmanis, and Qutub Shahi, as well as Asaf Jahis. Let us now briefly examine the socio-cultural and institutional contribution of these dynasties to the Telangana region. Telangana has witnessed various administrative systems under different dynasties. Just how India has witnessed various dynasties in the country, such as Mauryan, Guptan, Mughal, and the administrative system during British period. In the same way, similar kind of systems, they also prevailed in Telangana region in the past. So many rulers and dynasties, they have ruled Telangana and they all had their own impressions on administrative system, law, judicial system, arts and architecture, war strategies, as well as developmental activities. Etymology of Telangana. Etymology means the study of the origin of words. It's like tracing the family tree of a word to see where words come from and how their meanings have evolved and changed over time. So, the etymology of the word Telangana is derived from Trilinga Desa, which translates to the country of the three lingas, which are Kaleshwaram, Srisailam, and Draksharamam, which mark the boundaries of Trilinga Desha, which was later called as Telinga. And over time, Telinga evolved into Telangana. So initially, Telangana was known as Trilinga Desha, and then over time, it changed to Telinga, and finally, it evolved into Telangana. The historical evidence, it reveals that the region of Telangana, it was ruled by several dynasties. These are the major dynasties of Telangana. Satavahanas. They are one of the first dynasties which ruled for nearly 400 years. And then we have Chalukyas. They expanded their kingdom across South India. And then Kakatiyas. It is famous for Warangal Fort and their administrative reforms. And Bahmanis. It's a Muslim kingdom that ruled parts of Telangana. And then we have Qutub Shahis. They built Charminar, Golconda Fort, and even developed Hyderabad. And then Asaf Jahis, they are the Nizams of Hyderabad. Each of these dynasties have left unique impact on Telangana's law administration, architecture, and economy. Now let's look in detail about Satavahana dynasty. Satavahana Empire was one of the largest empires that ruled India in the ancient periods. The founder of the Satavahana dynasty was Simukha. They originated in Andhra region, which is in between the delta of Krishna Godavari rivers on the east coast. And later on, they moved westwards of Godavari river. Hence, the region between the Krishna and Godavari rivers, it was under the rule of Satavahanas for nearly 400 years. The region was also one of the 16 early Janapadas. And the Kotilingala in Karimnagar district was the main city. Satavahanas were the feudatories of Mauryans, and hence they inherited many traits of material culture from them. The early Satavahanas, they ruled Andhra and Telangana regions and were also called as Andhra dynasty. The earliest king Satakarni I, he was known for his policy on military expansion and he captured north of Narmada and Malwa. He was also known as the Lord of Southern regions, Dakshina Padapati. The Satavahana coins, inscriptions, and literature, they are the rich source of our knowledge about how their administrative system was. In this period, the south was ruled over by the monarchies, and the king was the highest official of the government, and his office was hereditary, which means the king would only belong to their family, like their sons. An outsider cannot become a king. That's what it means by hereditary. And they carried administration in accordance with the Dharma Shastras and the social customs, which are nothing but the traditions. The king himself, he led his armies in the battlefield and was commander in chief of his forces. The king was advised by his council of ministers in carrying out the administration properly. Satavahana Empire was very vast and simple, and it was in accordance with the Dharma Shastras. The administrative system was modeled on the lines of Mauryans, and they also used Kautilya's Arthashastra and Manusmriti extensively in their administration. Their administrative system was feudal and it was monarchy. The king was known as Raja and he was the head of the government. The Satavahana kings, they did not believe in the divine rights of the kings and they respected the Shastras, which acted as controlling mechanism. The feudal chiefs, they managed the land revenue and looked after the administration. The king himself commanded the army on the battlefield as commander in chief. For administrative convenience, the empire was divided into provinces called Janapadas. These Janapadas were further classified into districts called as Aharas. And Aharas were again further divided into villages called Gramas. So we have Janapadas as provinces, and under Janapadas, we have districts called Aharas, and under Aharas, we have villages called Gramas. And there were three grades of feudatories. Firstly, the Raja, and then we have Mahabhoja, and we have Maharati or Senapati. The Raja belonged to the highest grade. He had the right to impose taxes and to strike coins. The highest official of Janapada province, he was known as Amatya or minister. His office was not hereditary, and they are the men of proven ability. Such men were appointed to the office. So these Amatyas, they are not hereditary. They were purely appointed based on their merit. And each unit had several villages. Several officials were appointed to help and assist the king, and the most important were Amatyas, Senapati, Maharati, Mahabhoja, etc. There was also a special office called Uparikshita. He was in charge with the duty of building caves for the monks. And the monks were called as bhikshus. The monks and the brahmanas, they were highly regarded and they were above the ordinary laws of the government. During Satavahana period, there were separate organizations which were created to look after the administration of towns and the villages. The functions of towns were looked after by Nagar Sabhas, and the villages were looked after by Gram Sabhas. So the local administration of Satavahanas, in the towns it was called as, for the towns it was called as Nagara Sabhas, whereas for villages, the local administration was called as Gram Sabhas. They were looked after Gram Sabhas and Nagara Sabhas. And Gramika was the head of the village, and he looked after the village administration. The military administration of the Satavahanas, it was also quite efficient. Their army consisted of foot soldiers, they had cavalry, and they had elephants. Foot soldiers, they were the backbone of the army. And they kept a regiment posted in each village for maintaining peace and order. Under the Satavahana rule, the collection of taxes was neither heavy nor many. Land revenue, court fees, and monopoly of salt were the incomes. Trade flourished, and exports included mainly muslin, and imports consisted of such luxury wines or glassware and fine textiles. Foreign trade was one of the biggest source of income. The society was divided into four classes based on the economic activity and status of the people. The first class consisted of high officials and feudatory chiefs who ruled over the provinces and districts. The second set of people consisted of petty officers like amatyas, mahamatras, and wealthy traders. And the middle class people, such as Vaidyas, or they are also known as physicians. And the middle class people also consisted of writers, peasants, goldsmiths, etc. They constituted the third class. And people of the lowest vocation or class, they consist of carpenters, blacksmiths, gardeners, etc. So in the first class, we have high officials and feudatory chiefs, basically the rulers. And in the second set, we have amatyas, mahamatras, and wealthy traders, businessmen. And the middle class people consists of physicians, writers, peasants, etc. And the lowest class consisted of carpenters, blacksmiths, gardeners, etc. These were the four classes, economic classes under Satavahanas. And the encouragement was given to the trade and industry. The external or the foreign trade, it was carried through the famous ports of Supara and Kalyan. They also maintained trade relations with countries like Egypt, Rome, and Arabia. The traders and those engaged in other professionals, they had their own guilds. These guilds are known as sanghas, like coin dealers, potters, oil pressers, metal workers. They had their own guilds, own sanghas. These guilds, they used to look after the collective interests of their trade and they worked for their common upliftment. Several towns sprang in Maharashtra during this period, like Paitan, Nasik, and Junar. They were really big markets and centers of trade. In the southeast, we have Vijayapur and Narsela. They were well known trade centers in the southeast region. And to encourage trade, the Satavahana kings they struck numerous coins of gold, silver, copper, and bronze. These coins were used for the sake of trade. After the decline of Satavahanas, many dynasties ruled this area like Vakatakas, Vishnukundis, Chalukyas, Rashtrakutas, etc. Now let's look into Chalukya dynasty, who ruled from 6th BC to 12th AD. The Chalukyan dynasty, it was established by Pulakesi I in 543 BC. The Chalukya dynasty was an the Chalukya dynasty was an Indian royal dynasty that ruled large parts of southern and central India between the 6th to 8th century AD and again from 10th to 12th centuries. During this period, history of Deccans was the history of Chalukyans. They ruled as three related yet individual dynasties. They are Badami Chalukyas and Chalukyas of Kalyani and Vengi Chalukyas. The Badami Chalukyas, they ruled from Vatapi from the middle of the 6th century. In the eastern Chalukyas, they ruled from Vengi until the 11th century. In the western Chalukyas, they ruled from Kalyani until the end of 12th century. The Chalukyas ruled over the Deccan Plateau in India for over 600 years. The rule of the Chalukyans, it marks an important milestone in the history of South India and a golden age in the history of Karnataka. The rise of this empire It saw the birth of efficient administration, overseas trade and commerce, and also development of new style of architecture called Chalukyan architecture. Kannada literature, which had enjoyed royal support in the 9th century during Rashtrakuta court, they found eager patronage from the Western Chalukyas in the Jain and Veershaiva traditions. The 11th century saw the birth of Telugu literature under the patronage of Eastern Chalukyas. Administration of the empire. The government at higher levels, it was closely modeled after Magadhan and Satavahana administrative machinery. The empire was divided into Maharashtrakutas, which are provinces, and into smaller Rashtrakas, which are mandalas. So basically, provinces were known as Maharashtrakas, and the mandalas were known as smaller Rashtrakas. And then under mandala, we have districts, which are known as Vishayas. And under districts, we have group of 10 villages called as Boga, which is similar to the Dasgrama unit used by the Kadambas. In addition to imperial provinces, there were autonomous regions ruled by the feudatories such as Alupas, Gangas, Banas, and the Sendrakas. Local assemblies and guilds, they looked after local issues. And the groups of Mahajanas, they are Brahmins, they looked after Agraharas, called Gatika or place of higher learning, such as Badami, which was served by 2000 Mahajans, and Ahol, which was served by 500 Mahajans. And there were taxes levied, which were called as Herjunka. Taxes on loads were called as Herjunka, and taxes on retail goods in transit, they were called as Kirukula. And the sales tax was known as Bill Code, and the land tax was known as Sidaya. The king was the highest officer of the state. According to some scholars, the king enjoyed unlimited powers. Most of the Chalukyan kings, they worked for the welfare of the people. The chief queen of the king was called as Patamahish. The prince was appointed on the post of Yuvaraja. The king was the highest judicial authority, and he was also the head of the administrative council. Kings ruled in accordance with the rules of their dynasties, and the kings also used to seek the advice of other experienced persons in the matters of administration and other related programs. And there was a council of ministers to advise the king and to help him in administration. The Mahamatya, he was a chief advisor and prime minister to the king. His name is he is known as Mahamatya. Besides ministers, there were other officers who helped the king in administration of the state. The administration of Mandal was called Mahamandaleshwara. The chief of the army was called as Dandadipatyaya, and the heads of the village and law department were called Vishayaka, and there were other officers as well. The entire empire was divided into provinces and other units. Mandal was a unit of empire, and its administrator was Mahamandeshwara. He supervised and controlled his subordinate officials. He had also the power to either punish or promote them. And the villages were known as Visha, and its head was called as Vishayaka. Village was called as Visha. The head of the village was Vishayaka. There were other officials under him, and there was a special official called Pattaika. He was appointed for the revenue purposes. And the entire empire was divided into villages. The villages were locally administered by Gram Sabha and Gram Panchayat. Its head was called Vishayaka. Like villages, city councils were also entitled for local and self administration. The army was well organized, and this was the reason for Pulakesi II's success beyond the Vindhyas because of his very strong army. His military or army consisted of infantry, cavalry, even elephant, and also powerful navy. Even the Chinese traveler Hyun Sang, he wrote that the Chalukyan army had hundreds of elephants which were intoxicated with liquor prior to battle. It was with their navy that they conquered Goa, which was known as Revati Dvipa during Chalukya's period, and Puri, and they conquered Puri on the east coast of India. Rashtrakuta inscriptions, they use the term Karnata Bala when referring to the powerful Chalukyan armies. Chalukyas had Chautarangini or four-winged army. A great importance was attached to the army of elephants, and the king, he was the supreme commander of the army. During the rule of Chalukyas, there were separate military and civil courts. King was the highest judicial authority and gave his decision in accordance with conventions and on the advice of his council of ministers. And there were all sorts of punishments such as imprisonment. They also faced exiles, fines, and even death sentences. All these kinds of punishments were prevalent during their period, Chalukyas. And the main source of income was the land revenue during Chalukyan rule. And it was charged at the rate of one-sixth of the production. Besides land tax, there were also other taxes for pilgrimage and etc. People had to pay taxes for even pilgrimage. And also, there were fines imposed by the courts. They also formed the revenue of the states. Even the forests and mines, they were also the means of income of the state. Now, let's look into Kakatiya dynasty, who ruled from 1100 AD to 1474 AD. The Kakatiyas, they are the known indigenous power who ruled the Telangana region from the 10th century AD to the first quarter of the 14th century AD. They shaped and molded the identity of Telugu speaking people by establishing a unified political and cultural hegemony over the entire region. Kakatiyas have actually acquired their name by virtue of their worship of goddess Kakati. And Venna was the earliest ruler of Kakatiyas. The first known historical personage among the Kakatiyas was Gunadhyaya. It seems that earliest rulers of Kakatiyas, they were the subordinates of Rashtrakutas during the 9th and 10th centuries. After the overthrow of Rashtrakuta power by the Western Chalukyas of Kalyani, the Kakatiyas then became their feudatories or Mahamandaleshwaras under the Chalukyas of Kalyani. Kakatiya monarchs, they claim to be the descendant from the sun. Kakatiya rulers like Beta 1, Prola 1, and etc. And after the fall of the Western Chalukyan power during the reign of Tailapa III, the Kakatiya ruler Rudradeva, he declared independence in 1158 AD and he laid the foundations for the sovereign rule of Kakatiyas. He ruled from 1158 AD to 1195, and he was the son of the successor of Prola II. He extended his sway over coastal Andhra by subduing the Cholas. The Kakatiya capital at Orgallu, it was established in 1195. As Rudradeva had no children, his brother Mahadeva succeeded the throne. And his brother Mahadeva, he ruled from 1195 to 1198 AD. And Mahadeva was defeated by Yadava Jaituki. And then he lost his life in the battle. And his son Ganapati Deva was captured as prisoners by the Yadavas. And there was a lot of political instability during that time because of the captivity of Ganapati Deva and the death of the Mahadeva. Ultimately, Ganapati Deva was released by the Yadavas from prison and he was then sent to Kakatiya kingdom. It is argued that political pressure experienced by the Yadavas from other quarters was responsible for the release of Ganapati Deva. And then Ganapati Deva, he ruled from 1199 AD to 1262 AD. He expanded the Kakatiya territorial state by capturing coastal Andhra and by defeating the Velanti chief, Prithveshwara. And then later, he led an expedition to Nellore and placed Manu Masidi on the throne of Nellore. He united the entire Telugu speaking people under his sway and he shifted his capital from Hanumakonda to Warangal. As Ganapati Deva had no sons, his daughter Rudrama Devi, she succeeded the throne. At first, she was made as co-regent from 1260 to 1262 AD and afterwards ruled Kakatiya from 1262 AD to 1289. She was the first woman ruler of Andhra region and she put the state in order, subduing everyone who opposed her internally. She even repulsed the Yadava attack and drove them to Devagiri. The Chandu Patla epigraph, it reveals the Rudrama Devi and her general Malikaijuna, who died in the battlefield with Kayastha Amba Deva. After Rudrama, Prataparudra Deva, he ruled Kakatiya from 1289 to 1323 AD. Prataparudra, he defeated Ambadeva, his allies, and the Yadavas, and he then revived the glory of Kakatiya. During his reign, the Delhi Sultans like Alauddin Khilji and later even Muhammad bin Tughlaq, they paid their attention towards South India and began to invade the Kakatiya territories. Finally, the Kakatiya power, it came to an end in 1323 AD with the defeat of Prataparudra by Muhammad bin Tughlaq's army. The Kakatiya polity, it was based on the monarchical system. The ruler was the pivot of the entire administrative structure, yet he was not absolute autocrat. The power and authority was decentralized between the ruler and the subordinates. In the case of relationship between the ruler and the subordinates, they tried to introduce a new type of polity other than imperialism. The subordinates were allowed to have their freedom in all respects except military matters. The only concern for the king was to check their overgrowth in power. This made to believe that Kakatiya polity was a feudal polity or of personalized rule by warrior elite and a socio-economic formation marked by the oppression of the peasantry. Prataparudra introduced many administrative reforms. He divided the kingdom into Nayakships. And he divided the kingdom into 77 Nayakships. Some of these were later adopted in the Vijayanagar Empire. He was one of the first Telugu kings who defeated the Telugu country from the Muslim invaders. It was only after the death of Prataparudra the Muslims could enter into Telugu land to rule the Telugu people. The Kakatiya rulers were assisted by a council of ministers and a host of officers at the center as well as provincial and local level. They took care to see the territorial segments if they were properly divided and ruled effectively by the loyal officials. Mandala, Nadus, Seema, Bhumi, they were some of the names of the territorial divisions. Prataparudra, he began his reign with a series of reforms in the administration. He dismissed the Nayamkara system of appointing governors, called Nayaks, from different castes for different areas of the empire introduced by Ganapati Deva. Instead, he appointed these positions from the Padmanayak communities only. His reforming activity ended in 1303 when the empire had to face the first shock of Muslim invasion from the north. From 1303 to 1323, the Muslim rulers of Delhi they invaded 5 times and finally they annihilated the Kakatiya Empire. The Kakatiya state was a military state ready to face the threat of internal and external enemies. The military organization of the Kakatiyas was based on Nayamkara system. In this system, the ruler assigned fields to the Nayaks in the lieu of their salaries, and the Nayaks were to maintain some army for the rulers' use. The king fixed the number of soldiers, horses, and elephants that are to be maintained by the Nayak. Apart from the army that was supplied by the Nayaks, the Kakatiyas they also maintained a standing army under the control of the commanders, who were directly responsible to the ruler. In the military organization, the forts they played a very crucial role. In the epigraphs, they refer to Giri Durgas like Hanumakonda, Raichur, Gandikota, and Vandurgas. And Vandurgas like Kandur and Narayana Vanam. And then we have Jal Durgas like Divi and Kolanu. And then Sthala Durgas like Varangal and Dharanikota. Nitisara of Prataparudra, it refers to the above mentioned 4 types of Durgas. The society was based on the Varnashrama, Varnashrama Dharma model and it was divided into fourfold Varnas. Firstly, Brahmanas, and then we have Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas, and Shudras. The emergence of subcastes was noticed during Kakatiya period. Brahmins been divided based on the sub-regions of Velanatis, Veginatis, and Mulakanatis. Interestingly, the community of Brahmins, besides being scholars and teachers, they also acted as Dandanayakas or commanders and even sometimes as Amatyas or ministers. The rulership was not the monopoly of the Kshatriyas alone, and the prominence of the Kshatriya community as per rulers appear to have diminished largely. Like anyone could become a ruler, provided he had the necessary qualities and abilities. One of the prominent features of medieval Andhra was the emergence of Shudras as a new political elite, and other social groups accepted the superiority of the Shudras as rulers. The Bahmani rule. They ruled from 1347 to 1518. The Bahmani Sultanate was founded on 3rd August 1347 by Turkish governor Alauddin Hassan Bahman Shah, or he was also known as Hassan Gangu or Alauddin Hassan. He revolted against the Sultan of Delhi, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, and Naziruddin Ismail Shah, who had revolted against the Delhi Sultanate. He stepped down on that day in favor of Jafar Khan or Hassan Gangu, who ascended the throne with the title of Alauddin Bahman Shah. His revolt was successful and he established an independent state on the Deccan. Including parts of the present day Karnataka, Maharashtra, and Andhra Pradesh within the Delhi Sultanate's southern provinces. The Bahmani contested the control of the Deccan with the Hindu Vijayanagara Empire to the south. The Bahmani capital was Ansabad in between 1347 and 1425, and later on it was moved to the Bidar. The Sultanate reached the peak of its power during 1466 to 1481 of Muhammad Ghan. About 18 kings ruled during the nearly 200 years, and after 1518, the kingdom was divided into Bidar, Golconda, Ahmednagar, and Bijapur. They were all collectively known as Deccan Sultanates. The kingdom was divided into Bidar, Golconda, Ahmednagar, and Bijapur. They were collectively known as Delhi Sultanates. The Bahmani administrative system, it was modeled on the Islamic pattern, and the Bahmani rule experienced full of political adversities, invasions, battles, and even dynastic changes. However, the Bahmani rulers, they still had a well-established government with efficient administrative institutions, promoting internal peace and security of life, and they also facilitated for the welfare of the people and agricultural growth and even the trade, and also industries for education and learning. When the capital of Bahmani kingdom was shifted to Bidar, Gulbarga, it lost its importance and remained only as a provincial center. Later, when Yusuf Adil Shah became the ruler of Bijapur, Gulbarga came into the position and remained with the Adil Shahi kings until the Mughal conquest of the Deccan. The king was the supreme power in the state. He was the ruler, judge, administrator, even the military leader, and all the authority was vested in him. The king was the shadow of God on earth. The external symbols of the king's sovereignty were the throne and the royal umbrella, etc. The chief minister was called Wakil as Sultanate. All orders issued by the king, they are passed through him, the chief minister, and he used to bore the seal. The minister of finance was called as Amir-e-Jumla, and the external affairs minister was called as Nazir-e-Ashraf. The Bahmani kingdom was divided into four provinces called Tarafs, and each Taraf were under a Tarafdar. The early rulers, they used to exercise checks on the excessive power of the Tarafdars by the strong personality of the king, who spent a major portion of his time in touring various divisions and in supervising the administration of the officers. The Tarafdars were indeed transferred from one province to the another. Later, Muhammad Gawan, he redivided the kingdom into eight Sar Lashkarship to prevent the Tarafdars from acquiring vested interest in one particular Taraf. Each Taraf was subdivided into two units. This was intended to control more closely the powers of the Tarafdars. Some of the Tarafdars, they were also ministers at Bahmani court. Muhammad Gawan was the Wakilus Sultanate and also Tarafdar of Bijapur division, The Tariffs were subdivided into parganas, and parganas were divided into mamla or taluk or karyat, which was headed by Havaldar. So basically, the Tariffs, under Tariffs, we have parganas, and under parganas, we have taluk, mamla or taluk or karyat. These were headed by Havaldar. The Bahmani rulers, they maintained a separate department at the capital to look after its army. The cavalry and the infantry, it constituted the important military force, and at the time of Bahman Shah, its strength was 50,000 cavalry and 25,000 infantry. During the time of Muhammad Shah I, it rose to 1 lakh. The army was organized on decimal basis. There were three grades of categories of commanders. Firstly, we have commander in chief. He is known as Amir ul Umara. And then under him, we have commanders with ranking from 1000 to 500. The commander in chief's rank was 1500. And then under him, we have commanders ranging from 1000 to 500. And then under him, we have chief commander. He was paid through assignment or Jagir grant. The soldiers were not paid from the royal treasury. Instead, the commanders paid them as per their discretions and terms settled at the time of recruitment. And they also had, and the king used to get information on day-to-day administration of the kingdom through, we can say, spies. They were specially appointed messengers from different parts of the kingdom. The king maintained an army of their reporters, and they were under the supervision of the prime minister. But they had unhindered access to the king. Their duties were to report to the capital all day-to-day happenings in the different parts of the kingdoms and vice versa. So even there was existence of spies, and